When I was 15 years old, I liked this girl. But I didn't really know what to do with these feelings. But I knew it was important that I get her attention. So I was waiting for an opportunity. And one Friday night, a group of us were packing up after youth at church. A perfect opportunity presented itself. I went to turn off the lights in a big, dark church hall. As I flicked off the lights, it was pitch black, except for a small lit doorway at the far end of the hall that I just walked through. And I had a genius plan. So I turned the lights on again, and I went back into the minor hall where we were packing up chairs, and I casually suggested to her that maybe she should go turn the lights. She leapt at the opportunity, perhaps to get away from me, and went through the hall, and then I slipped through the door behind her, unnoticed, closed the door, the one thing bringing lights instead, and hid behind the church pew by the door. You see my genius plan? Are you with me? Alright. So, I am going to give her a brilliant fright. This is my genius. So, sure enough, she goes to the far end of the hall, she turns off the light, and she starts walking briskly and nervously back through the hall. And suddenly I have a terrible thought occurs to me. What if I jump out and give her this fright, and it's lame? All I get is an eye roll. That would be a terrible, terrible outcome, I tell myself. So I steel myself. If you're going to give a fright, it must be a strong fright. Where's it looking so nervous? And so she comes to the door. As she puts her hand on the door, I leap out from the darkness, screaming as loud as I can to give her an enormous fright. So did this succeed? I'm sure you're wondering. It did succeed in giving her an enormous fright. She screamed and she was very, very angry. It did not succeed in winning her affections. You may be surprised to hear. In fact, I think I had probably I remember it as a year of her not talking to me. But this was just one small, clumsy step in a set of steadily improving steps that I took, which means that I am now married to, let's get that, the wonderful Kim Bradshaw. Right, so good morning, privilege, wonderful to be with you this morning. I'm John Bradshaw. I'm married to the long-suffering Kim Bradshaw. We have three wonderful kids, Jack, Dee, and Emma. Jack is off at camp. The two demure girls sitting down there somewhere who are hiding are Dee and Emma. They're here to make sure that I bring the riz and don't talk any cap. If you listen carefully, you can actually hear this eye roll. So let's start with that. It's wonderful to be with you today. We've been at Jubilee 15 years. And I got something that I'd love to talk to you about, which is how to live when life doesn't make sense. This is a message that I'm giving to myself. It's something I'm wrestling with right now. And I hope the lessons I'm trying to learn will be helpful to you as well. And what I'm talking about, the kind of not making sense that I'm talking about, is what I call these seasons of unsuccess. Now, we go through seasons in life where life feels really successful, and then there are these other seasons. And I think it's different from failure. Failure just feels a part of trying hard, and sometimes failure is an inevitable part of learning, trying things, working it out. But unsuccess feels different. It feels like it doesn't quite make sense. You can't see what God is doing. So, to start with, I'd love you, just privately to yourself, to give yourself a score from 0 to 5. 0 is, I'm not succeeding. 1, I'm in the doldrums. 2, it's kind of hard for me to tell. 5, I'm crushing it. Never expected to be here. If my mom could see me now, boom. You can give yourself a score higher than 5 as well if you want. Alright, so give yourself that private score. Don't worry, I'm not going to make you share it. Now today's mostly going to be around people who scored themselves 0 to 2. If you scored yourself 3 to 5, great. Keep tithing. Enjoy the season. I have prayed on occasion, Lord, give me the trial of success, right? Help me to deal with riches and fame. I feel like that would be a real good challenge for me. But we're mostly going to talk about people who in the 0 to 2, hopefully there will be something there for the people who are giving themselves 3 to 5. So because I'm me, we're going to do this with the help of a chart, right? So this is a chart. It's got somebody's age along the bottom, and immediately the engineers in the audience are annoyed because the y-axis isn't labeled. So I will label the y-axis success, right? Success, but you're going to go, what are the units? What are the units of success? The units of success is John's subjective estimate of other people's success. Right, so that's how we measure it, you can't fight with me. Right? But basically, if you hate charts, stick with me. The higher you are, the more successful the person looks, the lower you are, less successful. Okay, whose life do you think we're talking about? Not my life? Good guess. Not mine? Somebody else's life? Correct. Not Wes's life? No. I get Trump. There's a first term, second term. Okay, I'll give you a clue. We're in church, it's a biblical character. Alright. I'm going to start picking on people I know first. Kim, you better shout out. David, Moses, good. We're in the right testament. Correct. It is Joseph. Right? We are looking at the life of Joseph this morning and trying to, it seemed like the whole sermon was just going to be guessing, so we have to right? We're looking at the life of Joseph this morning, and we're going to see if we can learn the lessons from Joseph. So, Joseph's life starts off pretty good. He's got a bit of a complicated home situation. You know, his dad worked for a guy and he got the wife, not the wife he wanted. Then he got a second wife, which was the wife he wanted, but then that wife wasn't having children, and he had a wife by the first wife, which he didn't love as much. And then they start making alternate arrangements as well. You should read it. This whole part of the Bible is pretty crazy. But Joseph's got 10 older brothers and comes into the world, and his dad, who had made it clear that his mom was his favorite wife, which is a dynamic I don't really understand. But anyway, he made it clear. He makes it clear that Joseph is his favorite child. Number 11. The Bible says, now Israel loved Joseph more than any of his other sons because he had been born to him in his old age, and he made an ornate robe. So not only does Jacob love Joseph more, he makes it very, very clear. And I'm the oldest brother. I have a younger brother. I can imagine that a fairly normal response from the older brothers to seeing the younger brothers spoiled with an ornate robe and perhaps even Woolworths vouchers was when his brothers saw that his father loved him more than any of them. They hated him and could not speak a kind word to him. So this is the context we're going in. Joseph's feeling great about life. His dad loves him, his brothers hate him. And then Joseph has a dream. Now dreams run in this family a little bit. His dad's had some dreams, there have been dreams going, and Joseph's dream is about sheaves bowing. And he's quick to tell his brothers who hate him about this brilliant dream and make sure that they understand that those are your sheaves and my sheaves is at the center, and that's it's going to work. You can imagine in this context, the brothers hated him all the more. That doesn't stop. Joseph does not hold his dreams close to his heart. He makes sure that all the minor parts, all the minor characters in his dream know all about them. And so he has a dream about the stars about him, and this time the moon and the sun as well. So he tells mom and dad, I think you're also going to bow to me. You're getting the feeling that Joseph is some super high EQ at this moment. Right? A 17-year-old boy telling all the people he meets how he's had a dream that they're going to bow to him one day. And it's not endearing him to anyone. His brothers were jealous, but this is interesting. His father kept the matter in mind. And so it comes to pass that the 10 older brothers are with the flocks, and Jacob, who's perhaps keeping the matter in mind a little bit, decides to send Joseph off on a supply mission to go and see those brothers. Maybe he's curious to say, let's see what happens with these dreams. So he sends them off. Joseph, clever lad, I'm going to see my brothers who hate me because my father favors me. What should I wear? I'm going to wear my coat. All right. So this is Joseph's life. You can see it's taking off a little bit. He's had these dreams. He's had his father's favor. And maybe he's got a dim, this is the star I put there. Maybe he's got this dim idea of what success I'm going to achieve one day. He's got in his mind. And if he thinks of his success line, hey, it looks like it's tracking pretty nicely towards it. It's going pretty well. So he chucks on his preppy coat. He goes off to see them, and things go very bad. Things go very badly. His brothers see this as a perfect opportunity. They go from killing him to dropping him in a hole. Big brother Reuben's maybe going to rescue him later. The Midianites come and they say, oh, why don't we make some money out of it? They sell it into slavery, and Joseph's life comes crashing down. Crashing down. Remember, he's just been in this zone of, I'm my dad's favorite, getting all these dreams from God, like the world is my oyster, and suddenly, none of it makes sense. Who do you think he's blaming when he's in that? We can definitely blame his brothers because they chucked him. He might blame his dad. Wish you'd never given me this coat. Maybe he's shouting at God. Like, what were these stupid dreams he had? It also seems, from his behavior later in life, that he's taking some personal responsibility for how he ended up in the whole life. Right? He's not a very personal, winsome guy when he goes into that hole. By the time we see him later, he seems like a different guy. His life's come crashing down. It's very hard for him now to imagine how he's ever going to get to that idea of success that he had. And he has this long walk with the Midianites towards Egypt. And during this walk, something seems to happen in Joseph. There seems to be a transformation. Because we don't see the same Joseph by the time we get to Egypt. He's 17 when he goes into slavery. And when we next see him pop up, he's working hard in Potiphar's house. Not only is he working hard in Potiphar's house, but he's having great success. Potiphar's put him in charge of everything. He's having him run the household. It says he left everything in Joseph's care. With Joseph in charge, he did not concern himself with anything except for food. Joseph seems like he's learned how to serve, he's learned how to manage. Things seem to be going really, really well. And maybe dreams back on track. Maybe the success line, maybe he's trapped. I've risen up fast in Potiphar's house. I can imagine my brothers coming to Egypt and having a bow to me. Maybe they need something from Potiphar and I'm running Potiphar's house. I can kind of see how God's clever. I can see what God's done here. And then he has the incident with Potiphar's wife. He maybe had some responsibility for the first time he was in the hole, but the second time he acts incredibly righteous. Potiphar's wife tries to seduce him, she harangues him, she goes after him day after day. He flees, there's a coat involved again, lots of coats in his life, and Potiphar is furious when he finds out, throws him in jail. Put him in the prison where the king's prisoners were confined. But it feels like by this stage Joseph knows the playbook. Because pretty soon in the prison, he's serving, he's working. In fact, we find out that while Joseph was in there, the Lord was with him. He showed him kindness and God's favor in the eyes of the prisoner. It seems like this prison is causing Joseph to move closer to God. So the warden put Joseph in charge of all those held in the prison. And he was made responsible for all that was done there. Alright, so he crashed down into the prison, but now he's running the prison. That's kind of an uptick. It's very hard to see how this line connects with his idea of success. So I'm sure he's there, he's questioning these dreams that he has. You know, we'll see later that I think he is still holding on to these dreams, but it's very hard to see where him. It doesn't make sense how these dreams are going to come up. Well then, an opportunity strikes. Two of the king's servants get put in, the baker and the wine cup holder, and they have dreams. And here we get evidence that Joseph's relationship with God has strengthened. He's moved closer to God. Because the moment he hears about their dreams, he says, God, do not interpretations belong to God? Let me help you. And he gives two interpretations, good news for the cupbearer, bad news for the baker, and sure enough, the cupbearer goes back into Pharaoh's service. But before he goes, you can see, Joseph still believes in the star. Joseph still believes in his dream, because he thinks this might be his way out. He says, when all goes well with you, remember me and show me kindness. Mention me to Pharaoh and get me out of this prison. And you see, he's going to jump. This is his big chance. And then one of the most brutal verses in the Bible. The chief cupbearer, however, did not remember Joseph. He forgot. I mean, so brutal. I like to say it's the hope that kills you, right? He must have been absolutely crushed by this. You can see it was just ticking up, maybe, and now looks like he's there. That was his one shot out. That was his one life lost out. Now, I've had the privilege of riding the cycle tour, the Cape Town cycle tour, with each of my kids on a tandem, and each time we leave in Noordhoek, we have the same discussion. We have the discussion because when you're in Noordhoek, what's left in the Cape Town cycle tour, Steve? What's left in the cycle tour? Chappies and Seikobosi. The two evil hills. Chappies and Seikobosi. That's what's left. But actually, it's not what's left. Because we have this long conversation going on. Is this Chappies? No. This is not Chappies. This is little Chappies. Because when I was 17, I thought that was Chappies, riding the Cape Town cycle tour. And I worked hard to go. I started going down the far side thinking, only Seikobosi to go. And I got to this corner at the bottom here, which we call the Heartbreak Hotel. And I turned around expecting to see Hout Bay and then Seikobosi. And instead, I saw Chapman's Peak looming ahead of me with thousands of cyclists. That was a pretty heartbreaking moment for 17-year-old me. I may have done some walking. Right? But it's never happened with me and the kids, because we know it's happened. This was put really well for me by a guy called Jim Stockdale. Jim Stockdale was in the Navy. He was a Vietnam prisoner of war. And when he came out, he was asked, who were the people who survived? He said, it's easy. The people who survived were the people who absolutely held on with faith that they would get out of it. I mean, that makes sense. I know a lot of you love Viktor Frankl. They had meaning, they had purpose, they knew, they had firm determination. So that's kind of what you'd expect someone to say. But there's a paradox for a reason. He was asked, and who didn't make it? Go, that's easy. It was the optimists. The people who said, we'll be home by Easter. Then they were crushed when they weren't home by Easter. We'll be home by Christmas. They were crushed when they weren't home by Christmas. So, it was faith, but without this false optimism. What he said is, you must never confuse faith that you will prevail in the end, which you can never afford to lose, with the discipline to confront the most brutal facts of your current reality. I really want this. Right? Because I feel sometimes like in church, when people are going through a bad season, we put enormous pressure on them to give us good news. Do you feel like that? When somebody's going through an illness or a hard thing at work, we say, how's it going? And what we really want to hear is, show me the line sticking out. Right? We're encouraging optimism, whereas what we need to do is encourage faith, which is different to optimism. Well, 2 full years pass. Then Pharaoh has a dream. And then you get this great moment of understatement. The cupbearer has this moment as he remembers that he was supposed to tell Pharaoh about the guy 2 years ago. He goes, today I am reminded of my shortcomings. And he tells Pharaoh about this guy. And Pharaoh says, all right, come get it. And what Joseph do you think we're going to see now? Has Joseph finally been broken by this? He had the up, he had the down, had a little bit of hope, then he was crushed. Listen to Joseph's first words. I cannot do it, but God will give Pharaoh the answer. He's gone close to God. You know, what would I have been doing if I came out of there? So glad you called me Pharaoh. I have extensive experience managing complicated households. Right? I was falsely in prison. I can do a lot for you. I've been watching things from down there. I've been managing the prison. Let me help you. That's not his attitude. His attitude is, I can't do anything for you, but you need is God. So, Pharaoh shares the dreams with him. He interprets the dreams. Pharaoh says, sounds like I'm going to need a manager. You're the guy for the job. And suddenly, Joseph's success line rockets beyond even what he could have imagined. Right? An incredible rise. And then, we're not going to go into it too much, but it goes pretty well after that. He keeps managing it. He looks after the years of plenty, he looks after the years of famine. His brothers come. He tricks them. There's this weird bit where they leave the one brother as a deposit but decide never to come back, and then they run out of food, so they do go get him as a deposit. I mean, it's really crazy stuff. You should definitely read it. And then eventually they run out, so then they come back, and then his dad comes back, and then he gets to bury his dad, and then he gets buried. And what's most notable for me about this period of steadily increasing success is he doesn't blow it. So many of our characters in the Old Testament have catastrophic mishaps. We know this from our own lives, from high-profile Christians that have success. So often, when we see their name come upon our newsfeed, we're nervous, right? Because so many times, success can lead to a downfall. It doesn't happen with Joseph. And I think that happens for a reason. You know, if I was God, and I think we're all grateful, those of you who know me most are most grateful that I'm not God, right? And I was sitting designing there, certainly if I was Joseph, that's the line I vote for, right? What if we do a steadily increasing success line? Would you just prepare me as we go, so that we go up and to the right, steadily up and to the right? That's not God's plan at all. And I'm particularly interested in this moment here. This moment where his brothers throw him in the pit, and then he has the long walk to Egypt. Because this seems to be an incredible moment in Joseph's life. I mean, Joseph thinks it was an incredible moment in his life. When he finally reveals himself to his brothers, they are quite rightly freaked out. I mean, it's hard to imagine how you would feel if the brother you tried to murder was in charge of Egypt and you now needed food from him. I think it's a hard thing to imagine, but I imagine you'd be pretty scared. Anyway, they were pretty scared. So Joseph goes, chill, don't be distressed. It was because of God. It was not you who sent me here, but God. He definitely thinks it was God. Now, when his dad dies, his brothers are freaked out again. They're not at all convinced by them. It's like, he was just waiting. He didn't want to kill us in front of Dad, right? Because, you don't kill, anyway, he didn't want to kill them in front of Dad, so they freaked out, and they come with this big story. Dad said that even when he died, you mustn't kill us, right? That's pretty much what they say, and Joseph weeps because he sees he hasn't got through to his brothers. And he says, you intended to harm me, but God intended it for good. And Joseph knows what that season is. Now, I don't think this was about geographical relocation. Right? I don't think he's saying, you see, God needed to get me to Egypt, so he got you to throw me in the hole because walking with the Midianites through the desert is the easiest way to get there. No, God's handing out dreams left, right, and center to Joseph. He could have had a dream that said, go to Egypt, and his dad would have said, yeah, you should probably obey them. I think he's talking about something different. And so we need a new line on our line chart. Aren't you excited? I mean, I'm really excited by charts anyway. We've got a new line on our line chart. And this line is character. Right? There's something happening with Joseph's character. And for those of you tracking the metrics, this is also a subjective evaluation from John. You already worked that out. Right? Also my subjective evaluation. Because his character isn't great, when he goes out to visit his brothers wearing that coat. Right? He's not dealing well with the promises of God, I think it's fair to say. But something happens in that hole where he takes responsibility. He draws close to God. By the time we see him in Egypt, he's serving God. He's able to, when Potiphar's wife accuses him falsely, man, he's able to stand firm. And then when he's in the prison, it feels like his character's growing. He goes straight into serve, draw near to God mode, so that when he has this moment of being raised up by Pharaoh, his character's in place. He has more than enough character to deal with the success. And actually, I think that's why, over the course of the rest of his life, why we don't see him derail himself. His character's always enough to deal with the success. So, why is this relevant? Well, it's really relevant to me right now. This is how I looked at about 15 years old when I told you the story at the start. I know what you're thinking. How did Kim resist that side parting? There's the favourite younger child as well. Right. And so, I was a pretty average junior school child. I remember fighting with my mom because she thought I was special. I remember fighting with her in junior school and shouting at her and saying, when are you going to understand that I'm just average? And then in high school, the funny thing started to happen. I got to drop all the learning subjects. I started doing really well academically and started to, I enjoyed rugby. I went to university. My rugby wasn't great. I hadn't made first team at school. I just tried to get onto second team school. When I was in first year university, the under 19B and the under 21C team kept trying to drop me to the other team because they both thought the other team was lower than the other team. And then, in second year, I suddenly got really fast. I suddenly got good at rugby. And my life started to move up and to the right, really quickly. In fact, I achieved beyond my wildest dreams of rugby. This is me playing for Province at Newlands. Right? Beyond my wildest dreams, remember I'm a second team player at school. Now, there are a few things while we're on this photo that I found off the internet, thank you, that I'd like to point out. I'd like you to see the fashion statement of the cycling pants, shoulder pads, and gloves. You don't see that trifecta, right? But the real thing I'd like to gloat about is just how hard the touch judge is having to run to keep up with it. You see that effort? Like, I was fast, and the bigger they were, the faster I ran. But just because I'm not here to show gloatos, I was still a massive nerd. So, but at the same time, I was a nerd, I was playing rugby, and I managed to turn both of those things into the chance to fulfill a lifelong dream of going to Oxford University. Went to Oxford University, got to play rugby there, got to study there, got a great job, worked in London, worked in New Delhi. I had a six-pack and an EQ and a good job, which means I managed to win the gold. And I managed to win Kim over. We had kids, we moved back to South Africa. I got a great job here in Cape Town, started to move through the ranks quickly, worked for that company for 12 years, and really did feel like life was up and to the right. Life was, in fact, we still sing the song in church by Matt Redmond, Blessed Be Your Name. And when we would get to the bridge, and we would say, you give and take away, you give and take away, I would just say, Lord, I know I'm going to go through seasons when you take away. But all I've ever had is your favor. I feel like all I've ever had is your blessings on my life. Then about 8 years ago, my mom fell ill with the sickness that would end up taking. And I used to spend Sunday afternoons closed in a room with my guitar, crying ugly tears, singing You Give and Take Away. Suddenly life didn't feel so up and to the right. It was a bit more confusing. But my career kept on going, I kept on rising through the ranks. And then after 12 years at that company, I got sidelined. I ended up leaving that company. Suddenly things were a bit more misty. Wasn't it obvious what God was doing with my life? I had a season of exploring, going around and trying different things, and after a year and a half of doing bits and pieces here and there, trying to find my way, I got a very interesting job with a great company. It was 2 years ago. And I thought, this was God's plan. This is how God's working it out. And in a week's time, this Thursday, my contract with that company ends. I'm back in the midst. And I can't see how it makes sense. I can't connect the dots. I can't tell if my line is going up or down. It just feels like the line that was tracking like that, it's got blurred somewhere else. So I'm going to try very quickly in our time remaining to pull out the lessons from Joseph's life that we can apply, that I can apply. Right. The first is reflect and take ownership. Really feels like Joseph in that first bit, he's taken some responsibility. He's looked at himself and said, do I have any responsibility? Man, I've got to learn this lesson. When I look back at how I joined my last company, I didn't listen well enough. I was in too much of a hurry. And that meant that some of my team didn't feel listened to, felt left out. But there are ways that I need to change the way I lead people if I'm going to achieve God's plan for my life. Second is, he moved towards God. Each step back, he moves closer to God. When he comes out of those setbacks, what comes out of his mouth? God. I didn't do this so well in my first missionary period. Right? I was too busy hustling. Right? Now I'm so aware that a key part of living well in this season is moving towards God. Now, I don't know if it's just about Joseph, but he seems to have found a secret in serving others. Served Potiphar, served in the prison, served Pharaoh. I don't think it's a surprise that he's serving others in this moment. We need to work on our talents. He clearly had some management skills that he learned in Potiphar's house, refined in the prison, and then had this incredibly complex management task of leading through Pharaoh's authority while you introduce a tax that's never been introduced before. And yet somehow he did this incredibly successfully, I think, because he had worked on his talent. So this is a challenge for me in this season. What have I been good at? How do I make sure that I'm even better at those things? And the fifth is to trust God. Right? It doesn't make sense. But just because it doesn't make sense to us, it doesn't mean it doesn't make sense. God's achieving his plans in ways we never understand. He doesn't even really seem to care about the success line. He's achieving his plan. That's the line that matters. And for that plan, he wants to work on our character. I love this quote from Steve Jobs. Not a Christian, but I think God gave it. It says, you can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect the dots looking back. Right? We can't see how our line's lining up, how God's making our path straight, until we look back and we see his hand through it. So, these five, some of you will have seen that there's potential tension in there, because isn't trust God and work hard on the at odds? When we work hard, aren't we not trusting God? When we trust in God, doesn't mean not relying on our own efforts. And we've got some pieces that are on the trust God, we've got some other pieces that are on the work hard. And I think that we make a big mistake when we put trust God and work hard on a continuum. I think these are two different axioms. Gratuitous 2x2 chart. The one is activity, right? You work hard or you passive. That is one. Either you're active and you're working, or you're reactive and passive. The second is, do you trust God or do you trust yourself? And if you're passive and you trust yourself, you're stagnation, you're not doing any damage to yourself or anyone else, right? If you trust God but you're passive, hey, that's not such a bad square to be in, but it's fruitless faithfulness, right? So you'll be content with your impact on the world. I don't think it'll be big. It's certainly much better than if you work hard and trust yourself, which will just develop self-righteousness. I came across a phrase in a brilliant book by Judy Chow, system of self-redemption. Right? That's what happens when we go there. We start trying to be our own personal savior. So what does trust God and work hard look like? I think it looks like service. This doesn't mean that you have to be at church early, getting everything set up, though that is great service. It means wherever you're working, you trust in God that he's achieving his purpose. Wherever you're applying your labor, wherever you're applying your work. Okay. So, we have spoken about the 0 to 2s, how to live well when life doesn't make sense. Hopefully you've got a bit from that. My father's an honest couple. What about the 3s to 5? You're probably sitting there saying, okay, but I'm on the up and to the right part of the curve. My life's feeling successful. My life makes sense. And can I humbly suggest to you, if you're there, that you're wrong? Life does not make sense. Life is crazy. Life is crazy. We're reintroducing tariffs. We thought we were reintroducing tariffs. Trump's doing crazy stuff in the US, and maybe that's good, maybe it's bad, but it's definitely very different. We've got AI that's causing such a difference in the way we think that we can't even look at it properly. We can't even look at AI for too long before we have to just look away. Right? Because the implications of how much that's going to change is too huge. But these aren't even the craziest parts of why the world doesn't make sense. When Jesus died on the cross, he conquered sin and death. What do we see everywhere? Sin and death. Right? I don't know how it makes sense. I don't know, reading the news, looking at the world, how God is achieving his purposes. It doesn't make sense to me, but I know it makes sense. And so that's my challenge to you. Given we live in a world that doesn't make sense, what should our actions be? I know I put 5 there, and they didn't even have the same first letter. Maybe because I was full-time Christian, like have the same first letter against every point. So I'm going to leave it with just 2. Just 2. What should we do in a world that doesn't make sense? Trust God and work hard. And if 2 things is too hard for you, if 2 things is too hard, then there's just 1 thing we need to do. That's love. Listen. Father God, you've chosen to love us and grow us through seasons. Some of the seasons are great. Some of the seasons make great sense. Some of the seasons are really hard. I know that in this room there'll be people that have had seasons harder than I can even imagine. Father, I thank you that you are working your purpose through those seasons. We pray that you would help us to live well in this season. You'd help us to live well, whatever the matter is. You'd see where you want us to work hard, where you want us to serve. You'd help us to trust you.